Another influencer missing the mark on the what women bring to the table question. This woman was frowning on that question and telling men that the only reason you're asking it is because you're coming from a place of lack and not out of a place of abundance, which is not an insult to men. It's an obvious statement that, of course, men feel and have historically always felt that they needed women. In fact, if you poll men and ask them, do we need women in this world? Most of them will say yes, without even having to think very hard about it. And the answer flips the other way when you ask women whether we need men. Most of them say no. So this is kind of a big elephant in the room when it comes to relationships. There has always been an asymmetry in the desire and need for the opposite sex. Men have always wanted and desired and needed women, regardless of their economic status. A ruler would try to have lots of women, if he could. Men who are in the lower end of the spectrum and impoverished feel a real strong need to, if they could get one woman, my goodness, what a help that would be for him. You see, men are programmed to be an outward-oriented vector. Men go out, men hunt, men retrieve, men explore, men burrow, men build. Men have an outward-focused biological system. If a man sees an attractive woman walking toward him on the sidewalk, he will be thrilled to walk near her and past her, and he will probably look at her. If a woman sees a man walking toward her, and this has happened to me many times, especially when nobody else is around, she will actually cross the road so that she can avoid me entirely, right? So we have a completely asymmetrical orientation toward the opposite sex. Men feel attracted to women. Women feel that men are more likely to be a threat than anything else. And out of this, of course, this fear emerges all sorts of toxic coping mechanisms that leads women down very dark paths in life. But nonetheless, it's just a reality. And so when men are pursuing someone from the opposite sex, they're looking to bring someone in their life who is going to multiply their efforts as the hunter, as the one who goes out and brings in the resource. He's looking for a person who is going to multiply, who is going to accelerate and help accelerate his efforts. He's looking for a helper. He's looking for an ally. He's looking for his confidant. He's looking for a really, really key partner in his efforts, because men are in a state of making an effort. That's how men live. Of course, not all men. Some men just pick the path of drugs and video games, and that isn't like a fire that's burning within them. But for a lot of men, it is. And usually a man doesn't pursue a woman unless he can actually afford to take care of her. And but that doesn't mean that he's just looking for someone who is just going to be sitting around doing nothing. He's looking for someone to come into his life and accelerate his effort. And if you want more specifics on what that's like, watch my other video on this question. And I'll give you exactly what that looks like for a man. Now, the problem is that in the modern age, like that poll suggests, women feel that men are not needed, and they would be okay living in a world without men. Not all women, of course, only 80% of them. Depending on the age bracket. Some ages they like men, some ages they don't like men. And it usually, I think it's tied to how capable that woman is. So if she has a job and she has her own place and she's taking care of herself, she's thriving, she's succeeding, the less the idea of a man in her life is appealing at all. But once she has any bit of uncertainty about the future and whether or not she will be able to take care of herself moving forward, once those doubts start to take root in her mind and heart, then all of a sudden the need for a man arises, and she starts to crave having a man in her life as kind of like an insurance policy or a backup plan. So, men, I've always said, men instinctively love women. Women, on occasion, may need a man. And that is the only time that part of themselves, their heart, opens up to wanting to bring a man into her life. Now, a lot of women don't want to admit this reality. This is, again, the elephant in the room that especially women don't want to talk about. They want to just kind of gaslight men into thinking, how come you can't just want to be with a woman who doesn't need you and you don't need her? We're just two individual, independent agents coming together and having it's almost like a friendship with benefits kind of an arrangement, you know? This idea of this 50-50 roommate with sex style relationship is something that appeals to certain men, yes. But these are usually very effeminate men. And so these are, in a way, kind of like lesbian relationships. I know many, surprisingly, men who have transitioned, actually, to being female, but they have girlfriends. So sexually, it's a heterosexual relationship, but on the surface, it's much more of a lesbian relationship. It's wild. But, you know, over the years, we've been selecting men with more feminine and feminine traits, largely because women are in charge of the selective process when it comes to sex. Men, like I said, are pursuers. Women are the ones who decide whether or not you're a threat or a friend or more than that. And women hold the keys to reproduction. This is, I think even women would accept that this is true. And so what has happened selection-wise is that women have been choosing, I believe, more and more effeminate men to pair bond with over the years, getting to a point now where women who are still kind of in their former feminine self, don't like many men these days. They're not attracted to them at all. And the women that do perhaps like men are the very masculine women who are looking for the very feminine men. So I'm seeing that kind of relationship emerging, a kind of a heterosexual lesbian relationship in a way, is how I would describe it. And this is a very modern phenomenon. I think it's something that has only been happening in the last 20, 30 years. So, yeah, I think there's a lack of, sensitivity on the part of women in that they're not really understanding what most masculine men are going through in modernity. They are feeling increasingly ostracized by culture, if not entirely ostracized by culture. A way of looking at the world that is entirely frowned upon and viewed as primitive. But I personally think there's something beautiful about a man that needs a woman and a woman that needs a man. And for that to come together is, I think, a very beautiful thing. The problem in modernity is that a man that is craving a woman that he needs and that needs him may find that over time, as that woman becomes more empowered and decides to go off and go to college and gain a skill and start a job, that she all of a sudden starts to lose attraction for him. She starts to lose a desire to be with him, and in subtle ways starts to push him away. Because, again, there's an asymmetry in our biology that says men will just always want and desire women, and women will want men if there's a need for him. And it's tragic. I mean, men are waking up to this reality. It's good that they're seeing clearly now, because before men were kind of living in a fantasy. They were living in a fantasy and they thought, oh, I actually do provide something of value. She does really love me. She does really need me intrinsically. But men are waking up and realizing that's not really true. Women are far more practical than men, actually. Men are much more fantasy. I think men live in more fantasy than women do. I think women are very, very practical and, in a way, ironically, more rational. But it just manifests in emotionality because they refuse to accept the truth of what they actually believe and feel. So yeah, thought I would bring this up again because it bothers me that so many influencers out there are frowning on men even conveying that they need women in a certain way. And that's not fair to men, I don't think. But men also need to understand what the reality of the situation is, and that they no longer can live through the fantasy of believing that they are somehow an attractive creature to women. You're not. So women are not intrinsically attractive to men. And that's just a reality men are going to have to deal with. And hopefully someday, there will be a symmetry in the amount of desire and need that a man has for a woman and that a woman has for a man. And I think that future is probably inevitable. Or we will find coping strategies that separate men and women completely from each other. And that means that the future of pair bonding itself could be at risk of disappearing completely. And the production of people would end up happening in a lab, sadly. We'll see if we can actually make it through this crazy time that we're living through as a species. Because I don't know how much motivation and desire exists inside of a man for a woman once he realizes that she's only with him as an insurance policy. It's heartbreaking. Well, if you have any thoughts to add to this, let me know. Thanks for watching.